Alrighty, good morning, everybody. I hope y'all are doing well. I apologize. We were having a little spout of technical difficulties. We still have a little bit, as you notice. The Colonel is not pictured on screen this morning. We're going to do a part two eventually, and we'll have him back to where he can show his beautiful face off to us all. But today, he's going to be just speaking to us through voice. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Just getting to hear him share and hear about his amazing career serving our nation. So, just wanted to explain that right off the bat before we got going. I don't want to, as I said, he had an illustrious career. I don't want to ruin it too much. He did retire as a full bird colonel. He served the Army for well over 30 decades, from 3 decades, I should say, not 30, from 67 to 98. He also worked in the reserves afterwards. Of course, he was in MACV-SOG with CCC as a Hatchet Force platoon leader. And then he also went on to be working in Central America, Panama, and did some very interesting work later on with General Dynamics and some other leadership opportunities that he came across. So very interesting resume, and we're going to just hop right into it. Colonel, I hope you're having a good morning this morning, even though we've had our technical difficulties.
That comes with either age or a shortness of memory, one or the other. I'm not real sure.
Hey, you did good. I still, at my age, have technical issues, so it comes with the territory. So we're just glad to have you today. So
thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. We kind of like to get to know the beginnings of our veterans a little bit. So we always like to ask a little bit about family history, but most importantly, when and where were you born, sir?
I was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. Spent all my growing up days through high school and the beginning of college in Wichita. And what I saw while I was there was people who had lived there all their lives, had spent their educational years and then their working years in one place. And so as I was going through high school, that's what I thought I would probably end up doing. Just like everybody else, I'd work and die in Wichita, Kansas. I graduated from high school in 1965. Matter of fact, one of my classmates was Kyle Dean. And so if anybody knows Kyle was at CCC the same time I was. So that's just an aside. So I graduated from high school. It was, high school was easy. I didn't have to work very hard. I didn't get great grades, but I didn't do poorly either, and went to the local university, Wichita State University, and realized that nobody there cared whether I showed up for class or not. It was big classes, freshmen, 200-300 people in an auditorium, and that bored me. And so my grade point average wasn't the greatest at the end of my first semester. 0.9 I don't think is a real good one. But I was 17 when I graduated from high school, so I was still not draft eligible. But once the draft board saw my 0.9 grade point average, I got a letter that said I had to go do the draft physical. And so I ended up went down, got my draft physical. And I kind of figured, this might be more than I anticipated, because I wasn't doing any better the second semester, and got a draft notice. But they were slow in inducting people because they had so many. They were pulling people in on the draft like crazy. Some people were enlisting, but most of us were draftees. So I didn't get my draft notice until later in the year, and then went up to Kansas City right after the first of the year in '67, and got inducted, sworn in, climbed on a bus with all the other inductees, and went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. So I don't know if people know that if you were drafted, you didn't take all those tests like you enlisted. You just showed up. And so by the time when you got to the basic training post, that's when they gave all the draftees their tests. So the first 3 or 4 days you're there, after they cut all your hair off and put you in an ill-fitting uniform, you go in and you take all those, I don't know if it was an ASVAB or whatever the test was. And so I took the test, and the next day I'm doing KP, and I'm peeling potatoes for 500 soldiers. And my hands were raw, and I'm going, I don't like this part at all. So I got through a KP that day, and the next day, all of us lined up again, and the specialist said, Peck, come here. So I showed up and said, yes, sir. And he said, no, I'm a specialist. I'm not a sir. I said, yes, sir. And he said, hey, you did pretty well on your test. I said, is that good? I don't know. He said, yeah, you qualified to go to OCS. By this time you're bombarded with all kinds of acronyms. I'm going, I don't have to know what this guy's talking about. I said, what's OCS? He said, Officer Candidate School. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you can go become an officer. You don't have to be an enlisted man. I said, so what would that do for me? He said, well, if you became an officer, instead of the 2-year draftee, you'd have to spend at least 3 years in the Army. I'm going, another whole year? Are you kidding me? That's a long time. I said, so what would the benefit be? And he said, well, come over here. It's windy. It's cold out sleeting. Took me to the window, and he pointed out in the parking lot. He said, you see the 53 Chevy? I said, yeah. He said, that's mine. I'm going, oh, the guy's got a car. All right, that's pretty good. He said, you see the Corvette? I said, yeah. He says, that's the captain's. I said, I'm going to OCS. That was my decision tree. So we started, I was ready to go to basic training, and they pulled maybe 15 or 18, 20 of us out and said, look, we don't have enough drill sergeants. So we have this thing called a leadership orientation course, and we're going to put you through this course. And when you're done, you get to wear these fake stripes, and you get to be like squad leaders and assistant platoon sergeants to help the drill sergeants. So we spent, for some reason, I thought it was a week. It may have been a little bit longer. And they taught us how to march, how to give cadence, how to do the daily dozen and do it, the commands for the daily dozen. They taught us all kinds of the, organizational structure, rank structure, so that we could be a little more knowledgeable than the basic trainees we were going to help train. So we get, and then we got these little fake armband stripe things on there, and felt pretty good about it. And so the soldiers show up, and the drill sergeants use us like cannon fodder. We're out there, we're pushing the troops, and we're not in any better shape or anything else. We're going to have to go through all the same things they did. We just have a little bit more knowledge, so it wasn't a big shock or surprise. So for basic training, I did all of those things, and I think we were probably in about the 6th or 7th week of basic training, and one of the trainees came up to me and said, "Oh, Sergeant Peck, I hope someday I can be as good as you." I told him, I said, "You kidding me?" I said, "I've been here 3 weeks longer than you have." Busted his bubble on that one. But those things happen. People don't know. None of us knew. My drill sergeant's name was Jimmy Johnson, and Jimmy Johnson was about 6'2", about 220 pounds, solid muscle, tailored OGs. And if nobody knows what OGs are, these were the olive drab wool pants and shirt. I mean, they were tailored. This guy had them all tailored, and he had the shiniest boots I've ever seen in my life. And so I wanted to emulate Sergeant Johnson. So about the third or fourth week we were there, they took us down to the PX to buy cigarettes and whatever. And I spent $19 on a pair of Cochrane boots because that's what he had, and I wanted a pair. So got a pair of Cochrane boots. I worked on those in the evening to shine them up. I don't think I ever got them quite as shiny as his, but I came pretty close. It was pretty good. Graduated from basic training, and then they loaded a bunch of us up on a bus and sent us to Anniston, Alabama for AIT. Do you remember the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
Well, I had a My Cousin Vinny moment because I was the leader, so I had all the meal tickets. So every bus stop that we stopped at, and when it was time to eat, I'd pass out the meal tickets, and we'd sit at the counter and we'd get our meal. And so sometime in the morning when we were stopping for breakfast, we were in Mississippi, Louisiana, somewhere down there. We ordered breakfast, and I gave them the meal tickets, and they brought out my eggs, and they had this stuff on my plate. And I said, "What's this?" And the waitress said, "These are grits." I said, "What's a grit?" I don't know what a grit is with my hash browns. She said, "No, you get grits." Oh, they were bland. I didn't know what to do with them, so I didn't eat them. But yeah, that was my cousin Vinny moment. And we went to AIT at Anniston, which was the chemical capital and the WAC training center. At the time, they still had WACs. And we were the only combat trainees on the fort. And our cadre were from the 1st Cav, just fresh back from the Idrang Valley. And so these guys are really good. We learned a lot from them. And then finished AIT, got on another bus, went to Fort Benning, signed in for OCS. I think, if I wasn't the youngest, I was the next to the youngest cadet in the company. I think we started out with about 250 cadets. We ended up graduating 118. And, along the way, they pump you up with all kinds of stuff. You need to volunteer for this, you need to volunteer for that. So I'm going, I kind of like that, jumping out of airplane things. I've never been in an airplane, but it looked like a lot of fun. And then at Special Forces, I'm going, yeah, that looked like a pretty good deal too. Well, I'll sign up for Ranger School. Why not? I'll just do it all. That's what the Army is all about. Those are the things that I think the Army is. And so, I volunteered for all of them. And I ended up, as soon as I graduated from OCS in December of '67, I got orders to go to jump school and then to Special Forces Officer School at Fort Bragg. And so I went home, came back, went through jump school, a tower a week. The second jump off the tower, they're oscillating back and forth, and you really don't get in a good posture or position to do a PLF. And I didn't, and sprained both ankles pretty bad. And fortunately, my roommate was a doctor. He was going through jump school too. And so I hobbled back in at the end of the day. I said, I don't know that I can do this tomorrow. He said, well, we only got 2 more days, a tower week. He said, here, I've got some painkillers, some pretty strong painkillers. I said, what are they? He says, Darbon. I said, okay. He said, you take 4 in the morning and 4 at lunch. He said, you won't feel nothing. You can run, you can jump, you can do whatever. So I took my 4 in the morning, it was pretty loopy. Took my 4 at noon, pretty loopy. But I got through the days, and then that weekend kind of healed up a little bit.
Wow.
Then my first 5 times I climbed onto an airplane, I jumped out of it. Never been on an airplane before. So kind of interesting. People don't understand that, but that's the way the Army is. They don't. It's just part of the game. I graduated from jump school, drove up to Fort Bragg, assigned to the 3rd group, holding there for about 3 weeks before my class date started. Started the class. Really interesting, but still, I'm really young, and I don't have the desire. Desire is the wrong term. I didn't have the dedication to really bear down and try to absorb as much as I could. But I got through the course. It was fun. We did a lot of interesting things I'd never done in my life, and I said, this might be kind of fun. And so when I graduated, went back to the 3rd group. Already had orders for Vietnam, so I spent a couple of weeks working Robin Sage as a support staff for Robin Sage for the Q course, and they had a lot harder than we did in Special Forces Officers course. Ours was kind of a gentleman's course. Theirs was not. But now I think everybody has to go through it, whether you're an officer or enlisted. But it's different back then. So went on my leave, packed my bags, went off to Vietnam with orders for the 5th group, and flew out of Fort Lewis and Hawaii and Guam, and landed in Tan Son Nhut, and went up to Nha Trang. Got to Nha Trang, and they took 7 single officers and took us off to the side and said, "Hey fellas, we got a deal for you. How would you like to be part of a classified operation? Top secret." I'm going, wow, I'd like to do that. Well, 3 of us volunteered, 4 didn't. So we signed on the paper. They started our security clearance stuff. We flew up to Nha Trang or Da Nang, and went to FOB up in Da Nang. At that time, it was Command and Control North, and they said, "Okay, we're assigning you to FOB 2, which later became Command and Control Central." Mm-hmm. So flew us down there, and that was the beginning of my indoctrination, I guess, into a world of intrigue, maybe is the right word for it. It was. I got there, and they assigned me to what they called the Exploitation Company up at the yard camp. You call it Hatchet Force now, whatever. Commander was Captain Ron Goulet. Terry was there. I think Terry came a little after I arrived. I arrived in end of July of '68. And Ron Goulet, there he is. He was from Springfield, Massachusetts. He was I think a coaching or sports athletic graduate, something in Springfield University. A really good guy, and met some of the other officers. James Gerson, who was killed when Bob Howard got his Medal of Honor. Yeah, and Robert Sheridan. He was General Sheridan from the Civil War's great grandson. He was killed on one of the operations early on, I would say in September, October of that year. And so, I had a platoon. The recon teams would go out, find a target of some kind that they thought they could exploit. They'd call us up, we'd get prepared, load up, go over to Ben Hit, marry up with the King Bee at Ben Hit, and then they'd insert us. We didn't even have time to go in and do a recon of landing zones. The recon team would tell us which landing zone to go in on. We'd go in on the landing zone. We deployed. We had a general idea of what the target was and the general vicinity. We'd spend a day or a day and a half moving towards the target, and then we'd send out a scout party to locate the target, do an assessment of how would we go about doing the assault or the raid. Then we gather our troops, do a little op order, and then normally by the end of the second day or the beginning of the third day, we conduct the raid, and then we get pulled.
Wow. And were you with B Company, like Mr. Terry was, B Company Hatchet Forces?
Yeah. So I think he had 2 companies down at the main camp and then 1 company at the yard camp. So we had all of our all our SOO, Special Commando Unit people were Montagnards, and so they had a compound. They had a compound attached to ours. And we had a gate that we could go through, and they had their families. We had huts down there with the families and the soldiers, and they were 10 huts. And apparently, at one point in time, when they were building this, the whoever built it thought it was a good idea to put Bangalore torpedoes in the foundation of these huts in case we got overrun and the enemy got in those buildings and used it for cover, that they had the wires run up on the corner of our compound so we could blow them. Well, one night we had a huge storm, electrical storm, rain, wind, and somehow lightning touched off these Bangalore torpedoes in about 3 of the 4 buildings that these people lived in, these families. And so we had a mess on our hands. We lost a lot of our indigenous personnel and their families. Sergeant Major and I went out. My Goulet was gone, so Sergeant Major and I went out, and we didn't let anybody else go out. And we searched through the rubble as best we could and pulled some people out and got Sergeant Ron Brown, the medic, working on them. And I wrote Sergeant Major up for Soldier's Medal, and he got the Soldier's Medal because we didn't know if it was going to blow up some more. We didn't have a clue. So that was kind of an interesting event.
Were you there when the yard camp was actually attacked?
It wasn't attacked. This was like a lightning storm. The lightning shorted it out the Bangalore torpedoes and blew it all up on its own. I mean, it was just it was a mess. So anyway, we got that taken care of and got people medevaced and like I said, I wrote up to Sergeant Major for the Soldier's Medal, and he got it later, much later. So I was there at the yard camp until about Christmas. And then I went down. There's the main gate. That was the front gate to the yard camp. Went out to the road that went up to Khartoum, one direction, and Platoon the other direction. And yeah, and then we had, that was the medics area. That was a dispensary and whatnot. And Boxy Brown took care of all of the injured and wounded Sioux and whatever we had, illnesses and whatnot there in that. So then we, so after, I didn't do lots and lots of missions with the exploitation platoon, maybe four or five. And then they sent me down to the main camp because I'd run our illegal club at the yard camp, and I made enough money that we could have steak nights and stuff like that. And so when I got down there, they said, well, you're going to run the club. I said, I don't want to run the club. I came down here to run Recon. Well, the benefit was I ran the club for about 3 weeks. And every night we played poker. The officers would play poker. And I played poker with Major Frank Jacks and Major Bob Leeds. And they were the 2 and the 3. And so I got to know them. And I got to Major Jacks. I said, look, I don't want to run the club. Let some NCO run the club. I want to do something different. Can I work in your office? Can I do? So, I don't know. I don't know what I do, but I could do something, I'm sure. So he thought about it, and he went to Colonel App said, sure, why not? And so I went and worked with Frank Jacks, and he was a expat from, I want to say he was either Polish,
Czech, I think.
German. I'm not real sure. He had a really heavy accent. Very stoic. Bob Leeds, on the other hand, was happy-go-lucky, bouncy around kind of guy. And I served with him at Fort Devens later on in my career. But Frank Jacks said, you need to go out on a recon so you understand what these guys are doing, and you know what we're looking for, so that when we're doing our planning and our intel briefs and whatnot, you'll have a bit. So I went out with Carlos Parker, my first recon.
Wow.
And I ran into Carlos in Honduras in 1986. He was Sergeant Major then, but then he was like a buck sergeant. But he was my 01. And so I went out. We kind of dry hole. We didn't do a whole lot. Didn't see much. But yeah, Carlos was an interesting character. So I came back off of that, and so I told Major Jacks, I said, okay, I kind of understand what they're doing. He said, so here's what I want. He said, there are times when they have a mission for the recon team, and there are times when I have an intel mission that I want done that's different. He said, so I'm going to send you out on those that I mine. Because we would get agency people. We had MI guys that came in from Saigon that would go out with teams. So we would do some extra things besides just the recon. So I went out with several of the recon teams, and my primary job, believe it or not, was wiretapping.
Wow.
So the recon teams would go in and they go on their target, but the NVA ran wire along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So my job was to go find a place that was secluded enough I could clip into their wire, run a tape recorder, cover it up, move back, keep one of the recon guys with me, and we'd sit there for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then we'd go back down and retrieve the recorder and bring it back, and they use it, for intelligence purposes. That's what I did most of the time. So it's kind of, it wasn't the combat recon guys stuff, but it was still pretty interesting. I mean, we got shot at a few times, and we got extracted. Back then we didn't have McGuire rig. This was before the McGuire rig came down to the teams. So we had, when I first got there, they were telling me that they had a foot loop and a hand loop, and they just drop the rope, you put your foot in the foot loop and your hand through the hand loop, and they just pick you up. Well, we lost a couple of guys that way. And so we went to a modified Swiss seat. And so we carried a rope with us and do a modified Swiss seat, hook up to the ropes that the helicopters dropped. But man, you want to talk about cutting off circulation. Your legs were numb in about 2 minutes, and they would have to find a place to set you down, safer place to set you down to get you back in the helicopter, because otherwise your legs would, probably get gangrene or something because the circulation was cut off. But yeah, that was a little different.
Jeez. Was Mr. Bob Howard around at this time when
he was there? Yeah. Matter of fact, he got a POW. I was there when he snatched the POW.
Wow.
Brought him back in. It was a big deal. It was a really big deal. Yeah, Bob was there. Shriver was there when I first got there. But of course, I was at the yard camp, so I didn't meet Shriver. He left there and went down to Command Control South at Manitowoc. So I never did meet him. But yeah, Bob Howard, yeah, he was quite the story. He was quite the story. So yeah, we, like I said, I probably went on 8 or 9 missions with Recon. I wasn't nearly as prolific as the Recon teams, but I still remember all the target sequences on the board. So everything I did was in prairie fire. I didn't do any Daniel Boone stuff, so I didn't go into Cambodia. It was all Laos. And my last mission was in September of '69 because I extended 6 months in country. And so, because they said at the end of that extension, I'd get 30-day leave, and I could go anywhere in the world I wanted to go. So I thought, I'll go like from Vietnam to Paris and stop on the way, and then go home the other way and do a round the world thing. That was my plan. Now, it's all plans, reality gets in the way. And so September, Colonel App and Major Jacks wanted to get another POW. They wanted a truck driver. And so by that time, Ron Goulet had come down to the main camp, and they assigned him the task of taking a platoon in to do a POW snatch, and they wanted a truck driver. So we had, I think, like 28 people. We had 5 US and all the rest were Sioux. And we came up with a plan that said, okay, if we can find a place on the east side of a ridge with the road on the west side of the ridge, where the ridge was close enough, within 100 meters of the road, we could probably set up an ambush with claymore mines pointing, like 3 of them pointing north, 3 of them pointing south, and try to catch a truck in the middle that they didn't hit, and take a snatch team, go down and grab somebody. Well, we found a pretty good spot. They inserted us. Took a couple days to get set up. And so we were about ready to send teams down to put the mines in. And the day before, there was nobody there. We had intel that there was a convoy coming, but there was nobody there, no OPs. Well, apparently somebody in the middle of the night came down and set up a little observation post, spotted our guys going down to the road to put up the claymores. And so they started shooting at us, and we said, okay, abort the mission. This isn't going to go well. And so we all backed off, and we had a secondary LZ for him to come in to get us. And by that time, we had a pretty good bunch of guys chasing us. And we found a bomb crater right on the edge of an LZ. So we all got in this bomb crater. And as we were trying to set up, they attacked us, and a B-40 rocket hit. It kind of glanced off of a tree and exploded, and it got Ron Goulet really bad. It got one of our NCOs pretty bad, killed a couple of the Sioux. So I got up and went over to get Goulet and pull him back down into the bomb crater, and I got shot in the butt. I think it was a ricochet or something, because it wasn't debilitating by any, but it hurt. And I pulled him down into the bomb crater, and went up to get the sergeant and pull him down. I got hit in the chest. But I got him down in there too, and then one of the other sergeants got a bandage on me, and the helicopters were coming in, and we were trying to get Goulet and the sergeant on the first chopper out, and so they got on the first chopper out, and then they got me on the second chopper out, and fortunately we didn't get pulled on a string. That would have been a mess. But we lost 6 people total. I think we only left one body behind. It was one of the Sioux. We got everybody else out. And so they flew us back to Platoon at the hospital in Platoon. Goulet died on the helicopter on the way, and then the sergeant, I think, made it through. It's hard to know because they had me in ICU, and it was funny because they got us to the hospital, and they put me on the stretcher, and they threw me into the ER, and the doctor looked at me and was talking to people, and somebody said, "Where were you hit?" I said, "In the field." "No, I mean, where were you? What was your location?" I said, "In the field." They said, "Oh, you're one of those guys." I said, "Yeah, I'm one of those guys." I can hardly talk. I had a lung collapsing on me, and the doctor said, "This guy needs a chest tube." So, I mean, there was no anesthetic. It was slice open, in between ribs, stick your finger in and into the lung. They couldn't get their fingers in there, and so they broke one of my ribs, a tube in there to start draining the fluids out, and then they're ripping my clothes off. That's all I remember till I woke up. But yeah, that was interesting experience. Yeah.
Jeez. And
so that was, I think, September the 26th.
Okay. Of 69, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is if guys, by the way, not a shameless promotion for Mr. Joe, but if y'all haven't bought this book, this is a lot of recon, but it is a ton of Hatchet Force operations, including all of the SLAM missions, Operation Nightcap, and several others. Were you on some of the big SLAM operations where
I did not go on those? I knew all about them.
Okay.
They were successful, but painful.
Oh. As you mentioned, Mr. Kyle Dean earlier, and Twiggy, as he's known by everybody. We've been speaking a lot here lately, and he actually had sent me his photo album not too long ago, and I noticed one of the photos was a breakdown and a map of Operation Nightcap. And his literally the first week he was there, he had just gotten on Arizona, I believe, and he was put into the field for Operation Nightcap. And he said it was a absolute nightmare with facing the enemy from 3 different positions on a hilltop. He said it was.
I think Grand Slam was a better operation, but it was still lost a lot of people. Lost being mostly wounded. We didn't have a lot killed on that one. But yeah, there was some interestingly big operations for us. I mean, company size, company plus size, building bunkers and you know, chainsaws cutting down trees, and yeah, it was different than this sneaking around clandestine kind of operations. But
did you find it different since you had a opportunity to go out with both and actually lead elements of the Hatchet force, and then go over, like you said, with Colonel Apt and Jack's trying to get to see a first person view of what's going on the recon side of things? Could you tell immediately how different it was? I mean, of course, size wise, but could you tell it was a totally different ball game going out with RT South Carolina and Mr. Carlos?
We might move, the recon team might move a click a day, maybe. I mean, they were very quiet. You know, most of them, I didn't do it. They wore those World War I leggings, and they did that for a couple reasons. Leeches, number one, but also it kept the fabric from rubbing together and making noise. And then they put tape on their thighs to do the same thing, so that the fabric of the uniform didn't rub when they were walking. We carried, I don't know about most of them carried Indage rations because the LRPs took too much water. So the Indage rations were, you'd get a bag of rice in the morning, you fill it up with water, you tie it up on your gear, and then throw some dried peppers and squid or fish or whatever they had in there, and just let it hang all day long. That's what you ate at night.
That's so ahead of the game. That's like the boil in a bag rice now. It's kind of got that same look, and the bag has that same. That was so ahead of its time, Mr. Ben Baker.
It wasn't ours. It was what they wanted. You know, it's what the Sioux wanted.
Yes, sir.
Our stuff at all. I got to tell you a funny story though. We were coming back from a mission. This was when I was up at the yard camp, and we'd hit a dry hole. Not a whole lot of stuff going on. We were coming back. We were in King Bee, and the yards were going crazy. They were pointing down at the ground, and there was a gore. You know, those little muskox looking things. So they wanted that gore. So the door gunner, we swooped down, door gunner shot it, and we landed, we grabbed the gore, we threw it on one of the helicopters, and we flew back into Khartoum. And they were happy. They offloaded that thing. They took it off to their little hooches outside our perimeter, and we got invited to come to the big feast. And so we went down to this big feast. They were barbecuing this thing up, and then they were making rice wine. Do you know how they make rice wine?
I don't know the specifics, but I know it's tough.
They take this like a wicker basket. There you go. You got a picture of it. Take a wicker basket, throw rice and yeast and some other stuff in there, and set it out and let it ferment out in the open air. So you got flies going in it, and you got all kinds of stuff. Then they take that fermented rice and they dump it in those crocks down at the bottom. Then they pack banana leaves on top, and they pour water on it. And they let that percolate for about a day. It's green. It's real green. And then they take bamboo straws and stick them down in there with the like surgical tubing coming off the end, and everybody sits around these crocs between their legs, like 4 or 5 guys, and they take turns sucking a beer can full of rice wine down. Yeah. I do remember, I don't know that I passed out, but I was not in complete control of my faculties. And I'm sitting out there in the Sioux compound, leaning up against the interior wall of one of the hooches, and I'm hearing people, seeing people, but I can't move. I mean, I am absolutely numb. And so the next day, my NCOs came and grabbed me and drug me back up to ours. And they told me, well, sir, you are now officially engaged to the chieftain's daughter.
Oh.
I think it was a joke.
Okay.
But I didn't know because I was still numb. Yeah, that was a interesting experience, to say the least.
And is that when they give you the
brass? You had these brass bracelets. Wow. You could collect hundreds of them if you really wanted to. After that time, I didn't want another brass bracelet. It was painful, to say the least. I barfed for a couple
really
days.
Got to earn that, buddy. Oh man. So you is it literally you getting wounded right here at the end as you're closing out your Vietnam SOG tour?
Well, if I'd have completed the 6-month extension, I would have been there till January. So I was a couple months short of finishing out the extension.
Wow. Okay. So you would have been there if you would have finished up till January of 70 then.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, some of those questions we'll hit later on, guys, about people around in the 70s. So with you not being able to complete it and stay till the 70s, until January of 70, I should say, are you spending the rest of your time in the medics being taken care of? Are you evacuated or?
Yeah, from Platoon, they sent me to Saigon, down to the hospital in Saigon. They got me stabilized, and then took me to Japan. I spent a couple weeks in Japan, and then evacuated through Alaska. Ended up at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver. And it was interesting because my parents, it took them almost 3.5 weeks to get a letter to my parents to tell them I was wounded. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's almost a month. I mean,
anything except that I was wounded. So now that was the time when the Army really wasn't very good at notification stuff.
Man, that gosh, and by the time I can only imagine them finding out and thinking something's terribly wrong, and then heck, you're already a month into recovery and nearly back stateside, or probably back stateside recovering. They got
the letter about 4 or 5 days before I got to Fitzsimmons. So I called them when I got to Fitzsimmons.
I know they were happy to hear your voice.
I think I made it home mid-November on convalescent leave. It was interesting. The Army didn't do a very good job of this stuff. So I'm at Fitzsimmons. I have no uniforms. All my uniforms are either in Vietnam or at home. And so when it came time for me to go home on convalescent leave, they said, well, you got to go in uniform. You got to fly home in uniform. I said, I don't have a uniform. Well, you got to buy some. I said, I'm not buying any uniforms. First of all, you haven't paid me since September. I said, I have no money. It's November. Because they didn't have direct deposit, So I don't have any money. They said, well, you got to have some kind of Army uniform to fly. I said, hey, what does this say on this gown? It says Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. I said, is that good enough? well, you can't do that. I said, sure I can. So, so I went to the airport with my voucher to get a plane ticket with my cane as I'm walking because my butt still hurts. And I walked through the airport in a hospital gown and a cane, and nobody said boo. Nobody. I didn't call my parents because I wasn't sure when I was going to get a flight out. And so I got a flight, flew from Denver to Wichita, got to Wichita, realized I didn't have any money for a cab or anything else. And so I walked down to the baggage claim area, and I'm looking around and going, well, I have some change. I guess I could call my parents. And I was going to go over to the payphone, and this guy was standing there, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to go home. He said, we can ride? I said, no. I said, I wasn't sure when I was going to get here. I haven't called my parents yet. And he said, oh, I'm not doing anything. He was a driver for like Holiday Inn or something, had one of the Holiday Inn vans. He says, I'm not doing anything. I'll give you a ride home.
Wow. Jeez.
So he took me home. That was a good reunion. A good reunion. Yeah.
What a good man in the age of I mean, my dad got home in '69 and he was spit on in San Diego, and there you are wounded. No one's even saying a word to you, and not a dime to your name. Well, a few dimes from the sound of it, but there, for him to be on duty working for a company and to take you home, God bless that man. If he's still alive and happens to see this, God, thank you for doing that for the colonel. I can't imagine. Oh God, getting to see your parents like that and finally get home must have been just an outstanding feeling, getting to see them.
Yeah, it was. It was really nice, and so I spent a couple months. Let's see, that was November. I went. My next assignment was. First, they wanted to send me as a basic training company commander to Fort Jackson. I called the Pentagon. I said, oh, come on, guys. I said, you just spent a whole lot of money, time, and effort for me to be, not only do I have a top secret clearance, I have, all this experience in Vietnam. And I finally, I don't know that I ever had a chance to talk to, you give me her name, Billy Alexander.
Oh yes, Miss Billy.
I called an assignments guy for officers and said, look, put me in a special forces unit somewhere, anywhere, I don't care. He said, well, how about Fort Devens, Massachusetts? I said, sold. So I went to the 10th group, and drove through the most deepest snow I've ever seen in my entire life, piled up alongside the roads. I thought it was like 10 foot deep. I don't know how deep it was, but to me, it was massive amounts of snow. I'm going, oh, this may not be really good. But it was a good assignment for me to go to the 10th group. Bob Leach was there, so I knew somebody. My company commander was Stu Perkins, who was another SOG guy. And so there was some connections. And I learned how to do some basic cross-country skiing while I was there, the first little bit. And then Perkins said, I don't have anybody to take over the scuba detachment, so why don't you go to scuba school? So went to scuba school, and that's a story in itself. That was the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. That was hard. Physically, mentally, emotionally, it was hard. So glad I did it, but.
We've heard from numerous SOG gentlemen and non-SOG Vietnam vets that went through, and they said the exact same thing, that hands down, Ranger School tough, Special Forces training group tough in its own way, but nothing comes anywhere near Special Forces Scuba School down at Key West. They said it was brutal.
Because at that time it was 13 weeks. And today they have a pre-qualification thing with physical training and all kinds of stuff. A lot of people drop out, and then they go through the another couple of weeks down at Fort. I don't know if they do it at Fort Bragg or they do it down at Key West, and then weed some more out. And then I think it's just an 8-week course now. I was just down there last year. I went down there last year, first time in 55 years that I've been there, and so the course is different because the scuba teams at the units are much more proficient for the follow-on training, and you get lots of experience diving. That wasn't that way back then. So it was, you showed up at Fort Bragg, you spent a week at Fort Bragg, and they did some physicals and stuff. And it was funny because I got there and they were doing the physicals, and they said, "Well, your eyes are too bad. You can't see the beach." I said, "Well, then why did you had all my medical records? So why am I here?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure. We may have to send you home." I'm going, "Well, I really don't want to do that." I said, "Who's the group surgeon? Let me talk to the group surgeon." So the group surgeon was going to be one of the students also. So we were in this World War II barracks, and he said, "Okay, I'll check your eyes. Come on, let's get out on the second deck and go out on the fire escape." And I was standing out there, and he said, "Okay, you see the smokestack over there?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What side of the tree is it on?" I said, "It's the right side." He said, "You're good enough to go." He said, "Well, you have to get lenses for your mask. Other than that, you're good to go." And so I did. I had special order lenses. I look like a frog. I come out of the water, I have these big eyeball lenses in my mask. And back then, we didn't have fancy stuff. It was twin 72s, double hose regulators, mask, weight belt. So, yeah, no double regulators. It's just one. You had double hose regulators. That was it. And we had those humongous Navy hard fins. I mean, they were like concrete fins on your feet. They didn't hardly bend. And so that's how we learned to scuba, was in that stuff. T-shirt, cut off shorts, sneakers. That was it. Nothing fancy. And we do 3 swims a day, 2 on Saturday. So 5 days, 3 swims a day, and 2 on Saturday. And you had off Saturday evening and Sunday. And we started out, I think, the first swim 500 meters, maybe. And I sucked both tanks dry, just sucked them dry. And as you got in better shape, and as you got more comfortable and relaxed, then we started doing some 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters. I think the longest one was 2,000 meter underwater. And you still had lots of air left. So we did that for 8 weeks of open circuit. And then we did 2 weeks of closed circuit with rebreathers. This was the old burial line canister Jacques Cousteau rebreather. You had to be careful that you didn't get oxygen poisoning from it. CO2 poisoning, because if the burial line got wet, it didn't filter the CO2 out. So, we had some guys going a little dicey times there. We'd swim against the UDT guys on swims at times. They were over on Red Beach, and that was always fun. And then the last week to 10 days, we did high-speed recovery.
What's high-speed recovery in?
When the boat comes by and pulls you out of the water.
Oh.
Yeah, we had a couple guys really got messed up with that. That's hard.
That arm rips it out of socket. It looks like every time I see those.
Yeah, that was hard. I didn't like that at all. We did some what they call it, where you go in and do a survey of a beach.
Oh, hydrographic reconnaissance.
Survey, and you'd go down that, and then they did it one time with no air. So they turned your tanks off, and you'd have to drop down and do your thing, come back up and tread water, move forward, drop down, tread water, do your little chart thing. Fortunately, that we were only maybe 500 meters offshore, so it wasn't horrible, but it was hard. We didn't get offered more than one jump with scuba gear. But that was an interesting, trying to jump out of a tailgate of a C-130 with tanks and fins and masts and reserves and parachute and gear. I mean, you had all your gear on your little pack board too. So, I mean, it had to have been 200 pounds of stuff.
Just falling out of the plane instead
of he didn't jump out of anything. He just kind of waddled out, and hopefully he didn't hook your parachute on the tailgate of the C-130. So we did one jump. That was enough. Didn't want to do any more than that. We did do a lock-in, lock-out of a submarine.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. Because you had to. It was an old, like a 12-man sub, 11-man sub, and so we were on it, and you'd have to take all your gear off and climb up into the port, close the bottom, have your air going, open the top, climb out, hook up to the top of the submarine, and then put all your gear on while you're outside the submarine.
Jeez, that's tough.
It was tough. Yeah. So, yeah, that was, just some of the things that happened at Scuba. So that's the reason I tell people it was the hardest thing I ever did.
I can see why. I mean, holy cow. And you're still with 10th group while you're down at Scuba School as well? You haven't left 10th group?
Yeah, 10th group. Left Scuba School. They called me and said, hey, on your way back up to Fort Benning, you want to go to Ranger School? I said, no. Why would I do that? That doesn't even sound like fun. So I went back to Fort Devens, and I thought I was going to get the scuba detachment, and I did for maybe a week. And then Perkins called me up and said, we're taking the B team and 3 A teams into Norway. I want you to be my XO. So, so we prepared to go to Norway. First U.S. combat troops to Norway since the Second World War.
Wow.
Yeah, Flintlock 1.
Flintlocks, okay. And
then, so we had a tutor come in and try to teach us Norwegian. We did all our pre-planning, and we took off for Greenham Common, England, and did we're sequestered there at Greenham Common, doing our pre-mission planning, and then jumped into Norway and trained with the Norwegian Home Guard.
Wow. What were they like to work with?
Well, we went in there with mountain rucks, with a big wooden frame, heavy canvas. They had aluminum frame, nylon. They walked away from us. They walked away like we were standing still. These guys were used to it. We We went into Trondheim, which is about in the middle of Norway, and then worked our way north, made it almost all the way to the Soviet border on the north, and this would have been in September, October, so it was starting to get cold. We had a few days of snow, but most of it was just chilly. Food sucked. The worst food I ever had in my life. For the whole time we were there, we had
Fish.
I don't know how to explain it. Like canned fish.
Oh.
And, almost always caviar. I hated caviar. It nothing fresh. Everything was one. We did have one meal with whale blubber stew. Oh, it was bad, really bad.
I don't mean to be mean, but I've heard
skinny and fit because there wasn't anything good to eat. I would have killed for a fresh egg.
Not to put the Norwegians down, but I have heard and seen some cooking shows and people traveling to where people have eaten they've got a native dish of some kind of fish, and if it's the fish you're talking about, I'm surprised y'all even open that thing in the tent or wherever y'all are, because the smell had to be god awful.
It was. And then you always had goat's cheese of some kind or some kind of cheese. It was just a basic fare, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, it wasn't like you got something different. It was the same stuff. Yeah, it wasn't a pleasant dining experience with the Norwegians. Did do Fulton recovery system.
Oh.
They wanted to know how it worked, and so we coordinated, and I got to be the guinea pig and got jerked up into a C-130.
Holy
that was fun. It really was fun.
That's some of the craziest footage I've ever seen of people testing that. I mean, what was that like?
Well, of course, the C-130 comes and drops this bundle of stuff to include the helium and the balloon and the tether and the suit. So you get this suit on, and the harness with the snatched rope in the back, and you just sit there, and then somebody fills up the balloon, and the balloon goes up and it tugs at you, and the C-130 comes along. I'm telling you what, the C-130, I could feel it hit the rope. I could feel it hit the rope, but nothing happened. I'm just sitting there going, well, it hit the rope. Well, when am I going to go? And all of a sudden, you went almost straight up in the air for about 20, 25 feet, and then gone. So it wasn't instant acceleration. It was kind of slow because the rope stretches, and you get up into this plane angle, and of course you're facing the back, so you're not watching the plane, facing back to the back. And the guys up in the plane go down and hook that rope, put it to the winch, and pull you up.
Jeez, I mean, can you see? I've always wondered. I mean, what does that have the possibility of working? I mean, is that a workable?
Oh yeah, yeah. There was the Green Beret, the movie Green Beret. They showed that they pulled that one North Vietnamese general out with that thing. I was in the movie because they filmed that movie when I was going to OCS.
Whoa!
So we were like extras. We were dressed up as MVA, and we were Viet Cong, and we were charging the wire. And I always told my girls, I said, "That's me. Those legs, those are my legs." I know that's me. I don't know that that's true or not, but they didn't know the difference.
That's so cool! Wow, man, there you are, Scuba. with the Norwegians, and then even testing the Fulton recovery system. The Sky, I mean, I've got some photos of General Singlop testing it, and boy, that his photo or his attempt looked mighty daggum rough. I mean, I don't think we've ever spoken to anybody that used the system before, so that's pretty daggum
cool. I don't know how often it's been used, because they don't publish that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was. I don't think it's often.
Out of the men that stayed in after Vietnam and even from Vietnam, as far as I know, there might be a few that stayed in that were doing stuff like this, but I honestly don't think I've spoken to anyone that was ever a ridee, shall we say, or a rider on the recovery system.
Well, Perkins was going to just do it with a sandbag. I said, "Sir, that's no fun. Let's do it for real." He said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No." I said, "I'll volunteer. I'll do it. I'd like to try it one time." So yeah, that was an experience. And I got back from Flintlock, and that would have been in November, and I got a call from my assignments guy and said, "Okay, we're getting rid of you." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we're downsizing. This is in, at the end of 70, early 71." He said, "Yeah, we're cutting the officer corps down. Vietnam's winding down. Yada da 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 da. And the chief of staff of the Army doesn't like special forces anyway." He said, "So you're gone." I said, "Well, what's the criteria?" He said, "Well, first criteria is college degree. You don't have one." I said, "Okay, all right." I said, "I can't fight that one." And so I said, "So when are you throwing me out?" He said, "Well, you can stick around for another 6-8 months." I said, "Well, I don't really want to do that if you're going to throw me out." I said, "So how about," I started looking up, going back home and cut when semester started or trimester started or whatever. So I picked a date that would get me home in time to enroll in school. And so I got out in spring of 71 and started summer school at a junior college there close to home.
What were you interested in studying?
I hadn't a clue. I wanted to stay in the Army.
I hear that.
I had not a clue as to what I wanted to do. Although I did think, Ron Brown, our medic, made me think maybe I'd like to be a doctor. But again, life gets in the way. So I started school, had a couple of semesters in the community college, and met this girl, and she had 2 daughters, and we got married. And so I was trying to go to school, work a part-time job, support a family, and it got to be so much, I said, okay, school's not happening. I was still in the Army Reserve, still, staying in touch with the Army. I had an Army Reserve unit that was doing basic training stuff, and so I was a captain. I made a captain when I came back from Vietnam, so I was running all of the combat ranges and stuff for basic trainees, and when we go to summer camp. But after a while, I said, I can't keep going to school and working and raising a family. And so school fell off the wayside. Went to work, raising a family, doing the Army Reserve thing. And then I was I was working for the post office. This has been in late '77. Still in the Army Reserve doing stuff. And I got a call that said, "Hey, we got rid of too many Special Forces guys. Would you like to come back?" I said, "Well, how much time do I have to make a decision?" "Oh, 5 o'clock this evening." I said, "I probably need to talk to my wife about this one."
Yeah.
She wasn't an Army wife. I mean, she wasn't married to me when I was on active duty. She was married to me when I was a reservist. And I was kind of used to it. So I called her and I said, "Honey, the Army asked me if I wanted to come back on active duty." And she said, "You told them yes, didn't you?"
Oh.
I said, "No. I better talk to you first." And she said, "I've known ever since we got married that that's what you wanted to do. So let's get her done." So I went back. It was late 1977.
Wow.
Had to do the career course, finished the career course, went to Fort Riley, Kansas. Since I was an infantry officer, because they didn't have Special Forces officers back then, it was not a separate branch. I had to do some infantry time, so I had a mech company. I would say that, I won't say it was the most challenging, but it was not the most fun I ever had in my Army career, other than the fact that I did start leading troops for the very first time. So I'm going to digress here a little bit. The Army did some people a huge disfavor, and the people did the Army a huge disfavor when they promoted us so fast. So I was a second lieutenant out of OCS. By the time I got to Vietnam, I was ready for promotion to first lieutenant, and I had no troop time, zero. I spent my time in Vietnam with people who didn't need leadership. They didn't need for me to lead them anywhere. It was all field crafts, skill craft things. I was really good at that stuff. They taught me a lot, and it worked really, really well. When I came back to the 10th group, all I had was the team. So I had no staff experience. I didn't know how to write a lesson plan. I didn't know how to write a training schedule. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So I think the Army lost out on a lot of people that got out, that if they had more time to hone their skills, leadership skills in units with soldiers, rather than just the combat experience, I'd have stayed. They would have probably thought they had more tools in their toolkit to do some things. I just powered on. I was oblivious. But being a company commander changed my opinion. That was, even though I did not like APCs. I did not like maintenance. I did not like any of that stuff. The idea of leading troops, though, was extremely beneficial. It gave you a sense of what you did right, what you did wrong. So you started picking up on all the experiences you should have had as a second lieutenant and a first lieutenant. And by this time, you're a captain with 4 years time and grade. 5 years time and grade.
Wow. And how long are you with this infantry mechanized company?
A little over a year. It wasn't long, because I was going through the advanced course, the career course. Once I finished the career course, then they said, "Okay, now you can start doing some real things." And so I left there and went down to Fort Benning, and I was teaching the career course.
Oh.
So I was a podium instructor, which is another interesting thing. It gives you some skills that you didn't realize you had on keeping people's attention and presenting interesting classes, lessons. Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed being up in front of a crowd. I enjoyed that experience of podium. I never used a podium. I was always all over the stage. Tried to make it light, funny at times, and I did that. While I was there, I'm going, Pathfinder school's right down the road here. Wonder if they'd let me take a little break from teaching to go down to Pathfinder school. And so I knew some people, and I got a few things accomplished, and I was really good at podium, and there was a break between classes. It was a 2-week break between classes. I said, okay, how about give me an extra week, and I'll do this 3-week Pathfinder course. So they said, sure, why not? Just go on down. And so I didn't even have an assignment. I mean, it's not like I had orders to go. I just went. I just went and showed up, and they said, who are you? I said, well, I'm Captain Mike Peck, and I'm here for the class. Well, you're not on a roster. I said, well, put my name on the roster. So I put my name on the roster, and I did Pathfinder. That was an interesting course. It was a really interesting course. And I came back from that, and I taught another session, and I got a call. They said, hey, Mike, I think we got a really good assignment for you. I said, when? He said, well, next month. You start next month. I said, where? Fort Bragg. Well, Fort Bragg. I like Fort Bragg. They said, yeah. I said, well, what's the assignment? They said, well, 18th Airborne Corps has a Pathfinder company that does Pathfinder stuff for Special Forces and 82nd Airborne. So you would be the company commander of this Pathfinder group that provides all of the LZ, DZ support, both on post and all of their exercises that they go on, all the training missions.
Wow.
And so I'm going, okay, you got me. So I went up to Fort Bragg, and then I took that for almost 18 months. A lot of work.
Oh, I can imagine.
We were everywhere. Of all of my jumps in the Army, 40% of them were in that 18 months.
Whoa.
We were jumping all the time. All the time. And my guys jumped more than I did, and I jumped a lot.
Wow.
You know, it was not unusual to get 6 or 7 jumps a weekend.
Jeez.
So yeah, that was an interesting fun time.
The Pathfinders are a unique organization. I finally did some reading on the Pathfinder guys, and I've got an interview coming up with a 4th ID Pathfinder next month, and that's always, like you said, the school is very interesting, and the mission of a Pathfinder is very interesting. So that sounds like that would have been a very interesting and not having to sit behind a desk type job. That sounds fun.
Yeah. So I finished that up, and that would have been in 83. No, yeah, 83. And then they said, hey, how about going up to Fort Ripley, Minnesota, and being a winter operations instructor? I said, sounds kind of cold. I said, yeah, it's cold, but it's good for you. So I went up there and spent a winter in Ripley, Minnesota, being a winter operations instructor. And it was the worst winter they'd had in 50 years. 40 below zero every day. And you're out in skis and snowshoes with pulling an Akio around, training active duty, reserve, guard people, winter operation stuff. So you had all different kinds. You had infantry guys, you had mortars, and you had scouts, but you also had maintenance units that would come up because, it was so cold that you had to have heaters on your transmission and your engines where it all freeze up. Yeah, it was nasty cold. I woke up one morning in this tent with 8 other guys, and it was 39 below zero.
Oh, whoa.
I mean, it was cold, cold, cold. Yeah.
I don't even see how you function in that.
Yeah, well, we ate 10,000 calories a day. So we just sucked down the food. And days were short because it was cold. Sun was up late, down early, and we'd stay out for 2 weeks at a time and come in on a weekend and warm up and then go out for another 2 weeks with another rotation.
Jeez. And how long were you up in Minnesota doing this kind of work? Wow. That was a long few months there, man.
And so when that was done, I went back to Bragg, and I stayed there. I stayed there for not quite a year, about a year, and then they asked me. Well, they didn't ask me. They told me, "Hey, you're going to go down on a 1-year tour in Honduras."
Oh.
I said, "Okay." So I'm a Pathfinder. I'm a jungle guy. I just did winter operations, and now you're sending me to Honduras? Yeah, we've got. There's a joint task force down there, Joint Task Force Bravo. And we need somebody to coordinate all the deployments into Honduras. It was a big deal because we had the El Salvadorian rebels on the north, and you had the Sandinistas trying to do cross-border incursions into Honduras from the south. And they said, we've got teams going in. So I got down to JTF-Bravo. And the commander down there was a first cab guy on the second brigade that went in that really got demolished, not the first brigade that did so well. We were soldiers once and young. And this was the second brigade. So this guy's name was Skip Bestmeyer. He was a colonel, and he was my boss. And I reported in, and he said, well, Peck, he said, you may think that you're going to be doing all special forces stuff, but that's not correct. You're going to be the coordinator for all exercises deploying into Honduras, to include all the joint exercises, Tara, which is a soft exercise, but also all of the LANTCOM, REDCOM deployments, all the deployments by the 82nd Airborne, because they were coming in and building landing zones along the Nicaraguan border, in case they needed to come down. It's called Operation Golden Pheasant. So I had all of those going on. The Rangers would come in, they'd go up to the Mesquite, and they were a real pain in the butt. But yeah, I coordinated all of the deployments into Honduras from everywhere. And then I was about ready to go home. They said, well, go home on leave, and then we want you back. Because now that you know the area, we want you to do some counterintelligence work for us. So I came back and spent 6 months. They gave me a suitcase full of money, rent a Forerunner, go around to all of the border cities, towns, boroughs, see what intelligence you can glean from the campesinos. So I'd go out in my little Forerunner and my little expat hat and beard, and I had Banana Republic photographer's vest. My Spanish was broken, and so I could be a real expat, not knowing very much. And I'd go around and go to restaurants and bars and whatnot, and buy people beer and find out what they knew, and and do that on both the Honduran and the El Salvadorian border. And I spent 6 months doing that. That was really it was not what I expected. I actually enjoyed it.
Were you semi working alone in this capacity?
Yeah, just being a Forerunner.
Wow.
And we had group at Tegucigalpa that coordinated all the stuff that I'd bring back. And Air Force, it was like a joint intelligence collection center. And I was the only SF guys. Most of the others were like Puerto Ricans and whatnot, and they were intelligence people. They were MI people. But I was the only SF guy that was running around doing this stuff. And so it was funny because once they gave me all that money and they said, "If you run out, just let us know. We'll send you some more."
Jeez.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. Did you get some pretty good actionable intel for the guys on your missions?
Yeah, it was they'd knit it together. The intel analyst would knit all the stuff that you brought back. Yeah, it was very actionable, especially on El Salvador and the rebels down there, because there were some areas along the Honduran El Salvadorian border that they called the bolsones, the pockets that were disputed areas after the soccer wars between the two countries, and so there was there was a lot of the rebels that were in those little bolsones because nobody knew who owned them, and so nobody really went into them. So you just go along, and go to some of those small villages and chat with people to find out what they knew. Yeah, it was fun.
Man, you're pulling some old school spycraft work there. It sounds like that's pretty daggone cool.
Yeah, it was. It was different than what I'd ever done before.
Oh yeah, and working alone, that's pretty crazy.
My Spanish got a lot better. I've lost it all now. I couldn't talk to anybody in Spanish if I wanted to.
Oh man. So do they keep? I mean, I can't imagine you stay in one place long. Or do you stay in South America or on this task for a while, or once you complete your intel gathering op, are you off to another section of the JTF or?
Oh, I ended up after that was over with. I went home back to Fort Bragg. And I was there like 2 weeks, and the guys down at Southcom had gotten to know me, and so they asked if I would come down and be a special operations planner.
Whoa!
So that would have been in the end of '87, middle of '87. So I went down at the time. They didn't have SOCs. They didn't have the Special Operations Command with the regional combatant commands. That they hadn't stood those up yet. So the Joint Staff had a SOD, Special Ops Division, in their ops shop. So I worked in a SOD. By that time, I was a major. I hadn't made lieutenant colonel yet. I worked for Lieutenant Colonel J.C. Hyatt. You might know that name. He was the mill group commander in Colombia, and his wife got hooked on drugs, and he got thrown in jail for. Yeah, J.C. was a good friend of mine.
Wow.
Yeah, and then John Mulholland came down later. He went to the SOC. He wasn't on the SOD. He went to the SOC. So the first thing I did was justify JTF-Bravo and why that was important to be down there. Did that, and then we started doing the planning for the incorporation of SOC South into the Southcom AOR. How is that going to work? What were the lines of command and control? And so I worked with the first SOC South commander, Fred Scruggs, on how we did that, and his deputy was Remo Butler. So Remo Butler and I worked together a lot. I don't know if you know who Remo is.
I do not know. No, sir.
Of course, he was a lot younger. He was younger than me. Big, black, strapping guy, Portuguese and Spanish.
Wow.
And he ended up as a 1-star. But he was also a boxer, and he boxed professionally, but mostly as a sparring partner for heavyweight fighters on his spare time. Yeah, Remo was an interesting character.
I'll have to look him up. He sounds like quite the character. Wow.
And Bugs left, Ken Bowray came down.
Oh wow, CCN legend, Mr.
Yeah.
Ken.
Yeah, so I met him, knew him pretty well. He collected Civil War cannonballs as a hobby. I don't know why, but he did. Yeah.
Wow. And I couldn't remember, was there anything going on at the time with you guys and JTF-Bravo? Were y'all ever looking at Escobar and any of the stuff going on with the cartels and such?
Let me tell you the story. So here's the story. So I'm the special operations planner. We're doing now that we've gotten the SOC on board, now that we've gotten all that stuff done, now we're the sync at the time gone from Fred Warner to, for the life of me, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he was there as a 4-star, and he wanted us to plan a surgical kill of Noriega and his top henchman. And he went up and pitched it to Washington, D.C., pitched it to Colin Powell, and Colin Powell said, no. There's not going to be a surgical anything. We're taking the whole country down.
Oh.
Fired this guy, 4-star general, said, get out of there, and sent Max Thurman down. Max Thurman had put in for retirement. He was Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, probably the most brilliant mind in the Army staff ever. Anyway, Max came down, and we started doing the planning for Operation Just Cause. That's not what it was called when we were doing the planning, but that's what it ended up being called. And so I planned the special ops piece of it. You know, how do we get Kurt Muse out of the jail? Having the Rangers jump into Rio Hato. You know, how are we going to grab Noriega? So the Delta guys came down, and I worked with them, and the SEAL came down. We worked with them, and so that was an interesting planning event, and it went off fairly well. It wasn't perfect, but fairly well. The SEALs didn't really surprise them at the airport. They got shot up pretty bad. Lost several of them. But the rest of on the special ops side went well. You know, they got Kurt Muse out, surprised the crap out of him. Rio Hato fell first night. 82nd didn't do so well. They dropped their stuff in on Tucumán Airport, and half of it went in the swamp. Half of, so it didn't work out exactly the way we thought. And 2 days after the invasion, the J3 pulled me out of the SOD to be his XO.
Oh.
So by this time, I'm a lieutenant colonel, and I'm XO to the J3 of Southcom.
Wow. That
was really, really fun. As I got to see everything. I got my TS SCI clearance finished. Bill Hartzog was my boss. He ended up being a 4-star at TRADOC. And I did that for, let's see, that would have been did that in 90 and 91. I was his XO, then I was Ellerson's XO, and then I was John Thompson's XO, and I finally told him, I said, I'm tired of being XO. And so the chief of SOG retired suddenly, and they had nobody to replace him. So they might go over and take the SOG. So I took the SOG over in 92, beginning of 92. And that's when we were going after Pablo. So a couple of names you might know. Dick Cody, he was Task Force 160, he was a lieutenant colonel then. And Jerry Boykin. Jerry Boykin was a Delta commander.
Oh, yeah.
I worked with those two guys daily. Wow. Daily. Matter of fact, Cody was kind of a cowboy. He did some really interesting things. I think he was the very first one that flew drones and a helicopter at the same time down there trying to find Pablo. But we did find Pablo. Wow. And we're the ones that got him, not the Colombians, but we gave him credit for it. But that was interesting because that was a joint combined Colombian U.S. military, all the three-letter agencies, NSA, Coast Guard, all of them working together. So you got to know a lot of different people with a lot of different skills and capabilities, which was really good for me because I learned some things I didn't know before. And then I ran the skiff that was down there, and it was at that time it was the only classified video teleconferencing capability in the world. And so I'd have to spin it up, and all the syncs would get together, now regional combatant commanders, and they would talk to one another about what they were doing because Desert Storm was going on. There was a lot of stuff going on. So it was really an eye opener for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you shot up there at the end to where, I mean, like you said, you were seeing and a part of everything there coming in. I mean, the stand up of SOCOM starting up, and I mean Delta and Mr. Boykin and all of them, Eldon Bargewell, man, this and I think now that you mentioned just
real heroes. I met some real heroes throughout my career. I can't say that I'm one, but I know that they were. They were tremendous soldiers. I was just lucky to be around them. But juxtapose this: the difference in communications that I saw in my time in the military. So in Panama, I've got video teleconferencing, ultra secure, state of the art. When I was in Norway, you know how we communicated? Long wire antenna, hand crank generator, and Morse code.
Wow.
I mean the difference in technology, and now I don't know, I have no clue how much better it is. Oh, by the way, I did spend 2 weeks on Leghorn too. I hurt my ankle on a mission, and Jack said, "Well, you're not any good to me." He said, "Why don't you go up for a couple of weeks and let your ankle heal up at Leghorn?" So I went up to Leghorn and spent 2 weeks, which was another interesting experience, doing that go-between voice between the teams and the support stuff, the coveys and the air support and our base, which was a different kind of thing too.
And we've, of course, Mr. Terry has spoken about Leghorn numerous times. What was your thought of being up there? What was it like?
Well, you had a few moments of intense stress, and the rest of it was boring. You were just sitting around up there waiting for a team to call, you know, and when they called, they were always in trouble. And then you had to figure out how you could help them. You know, you learned that they couldn't talk to you all the time, that you would have to whisper to them and just have them like break squelch, so you'd know that they got what you were talking about, because they were, you know, within close proximity to the bad guys. So yeah, it was, and you were their only lifeline, because we didn't have even PRC 25s. We had PRC 10s. We had the first generation PRCs, and with whip antennas. I mean, it's not like we had good stuff, you know. It was pretty primitive.
Hearing all this, it's amazing you guys, more guys weren't lost with radio issues and such. I mean, it's just amazing what they were asking y'all to do and what y'all were doing back then with such primitive stuff compared to now. But I mean, even back then, gosh, yeah, that's scary stuff. You being the only lifeline for guys over in Laos and them getting back home.
Well, I missed one story. So the mission that Bob Howard and James Gerson went on, when Gerson got killed and Howard got written up for the Medal of Honor, they went in, you know, to find a recon team that had been overrun, and never did find them because they got run out. And that was the Hatchet force from down in the main camp. So my last Hatchet force mission out of the yard camp was 2 days later. We went back in to try to find the recon team bodies and pull them out. We did, and didn't meet hardly any resistance. Got the bodies out and came back.
Man, oh man. And do you remember when that one was?
Because they went at Christmas of '68, so this would have been around New Year. So it was 2 or 3 days after they'd been pulled. I don't know the exact dates, and it was right after that I went back down to the main camp.
Man, yeah, it seems like Mr. Bob went in several. I wonder if that was the one where they were looking for Joe Walker in RT, California.
I think so.
Yeah, God, that was a nightmare. From all of the books, you can read it in Joe's books, and of course my favorite CCC book out currently, Steve Moore's Uncommon Valor, which is fantastic. Jeez Louise. I lost track of career-wise here. I think 92. You said.
So I was a sod chief until we got Pablo, and then I don't know if you remember, there was a C-130 surveillance aircraft that got shot down by the Peruvians. Killed one of the crew. It was crippled. Ended up landing at one of the Peruvian Air Force bases. So not only was I the chief of SOG, but I was also the deputy Joint Task Force, deployable Joint Task Force commander. And so we hopped on a plane and flew down to Peru, landed at this Air Force base without clearance. Got there before that the Peruvian Army did, because it had, you know, the plane had all kinds of highly classified stuff on it. So there was 14 of us, and we set up a little perimeter around the C-130, and the Army, Peruvian Army came up and said, well, we want the plane. And I said, well, you can't have it.
No.
He said, well, we outnumber you. And my boss said, well, you don't understand. He said, we've got 4 F-16s right offshore. You even try to take this thing, and we'll have them come in and nuke you. I don't think we really did. I think he was
good bluff.
But they took the bluff, and we eventually got a crew in to fix the plane so it could take off and get back. So yeah, that was kind of a fun mission. That was the last thing I did in Panama. I come back. I was doing some triathlons too down there, but when we came back from that one, I picked up some kind of an intestinal parasite, and I got back and I was just sicker than a dog, and I went to the hospital and they gave me some whatever it was they said would kill this parasite, and I had a reaction to the drug and had a massive heart attack.
Oh.
And got stabilized, but it was pretty nasty. And of course they wanted to send me back to the States. They wanted me to go to Walter Reed. Well, the medevac plane that came down would come to Panama, and then it would go to Fort Sam Houston, then it would go to Scott Air Force Base, and then it would go someplace else, then it would go to Walter Reed. And the doctor said, well, that's not going to get it. So Thurman was still the saint. No, Jowin was the saint by that time. And Jowin said, hey, just take the D-Syncs plane. Just fly him up to Walter Reed in the D-Syncs plane. So my wife and my dog and all of our stuff got loaded up into this little jet and flew back up to the States and went to Walter Reed. And yeah.
Thank God.
And so I didn't have an assignment. I'm at Walter Reed, and they'd finally give me okay, but we want to keep you close because we want to monitor your heart, make sure nothing's going bad with it and all that. I said, well, you're going to put me at the Pentagon? No, I think we have a reserve unit down at Fort Belvoir that we have an opening for senior military active Army advisor to this unit. I said, well, what kind of unit is it? They said, what's a TAACOM? I'm going, a what? A Theater Army Area Command. It says a big logistics headquarters. I said, I don't know anything about logistics. Well, you're going to learn, I guess, because that's where we want you to go. Maybe one of the best assignments I ever had.
Oh.
I learned more about how the Army worked to support itself than anything. I mean, we had pipeline companies, we had chaplains teams, we had transportation battalions, we had all of the boats. I didn't even know the Army had boats. We had boats. We had teams that did reception staging and onward movement. So we ran the ports. We had material handling equipment. It was amazing. And so these reservists taught me all this stuff about how the Army got supported. I had not a clue. And so it was a big organization. It had like 88 downtrace units. So the Army was fielding a bunch of new equipment to it. And so I had to go to force management school at Fort Belvoir. Spent 4 weeks learning how to do force management, which is another godsend for me eventually. You know, God has played a role in my career, moving me to places that I needed to be, even though I might not have wanted to be at first. And he's still doing that today for me. So I give him all the credit on marking a path for me through this collage of careers that I've had. So I spent 2.5 years at this logistics organization and just learned a ton. And then my tour was over. I was going to go to Fort Lewis, Washington as the chief of staff of I-Corps as an 06. Wow. I was looking forward to that because I-Corps was kind of a quiet. I could see salmon fishing in Puget Sound. You know, I could see weekends looking at Mount Rainier. I flew out there. They had a house for me right on the parade ground, '06, looking at Mount Rainier out my front door. I'm going, yeah, oh, this is going to be good, 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 good. And about a week before they packed me up to move me out there, my reserve boss got promoted to 3-star and given command of the Army Reserve Command in Atlanta, Georgia. And my assignment guy called me and said, Mike, what do you think about Atlanta? I said, I don't think about Atlanta. Well, you better think about Atlanta because your boss wants you down there really bad. I said, to do what? Well, there's 2 active duty positions on the Army Reserves Command staff. One is the deputy commander, who's a 1-star, and the other one is the chief of training. And you're going to be the chief of training for the Army Reserve. I'm going, okay. So I had this Fort Lewis, Washington, backwater, quiet, 8-hour day, 6-hour day, maybe. And I'm going to go to the reserve command where all the reserve units meet on the weekends. So I got to do all my work during the week. And on the weekends, I got to try. They said, yep, that's what you're going to do. And so I got promoted to colonel. I went down there, and that was another great experience, much to my chagrin, to meet all these people from all the different reserve organizations to understand, because they just transitioned all the components in the Army from active duty, and then the National Guard was shifted to all combat support, and the reserves were all combat service support. So we had hospitals, transportation units, rear area MP security, all those kinds of things. And my staff of 100 were mostly combat guys. Didn't have hardly anybody else. And then all of these regional reserve component commanders, most of them had spent a lot of time as combat guys. So they wanted to send their units to combat stuff, adjust fire, rifle range, that kind of stuff. Well, I had the purse strings. I gave them the money for their summer camps, right? For whatever they were doing. So first of all, I had to educate my team. I said, okay, here's echelon, brigade, and below. You aren't there. That's not us. We don't do those things. We have echelon above brigade. That's us. We're way back here. We're not shooting anybody. We're not firing artillery rounds at anybody. We're there to get them from the port to the brigade area and all the things in between. That's what we do. It took 4 or 5 months to orient them to do that. Then I said, okay, here's the task. The task is you come up with a grading system that if a unit is doing a joint exercise, they get priority for money if they're doing their MOS task. And a joint exercise, and if it's like a regional exercise, it gets fewer points, and grade it down until there's no points, and I don't give them any money for anything. And so they put that together, and then I took it out to all the regional commanders. This is what it's going to be. They did not like it at all, but it worked. It worked real well, and they finally understood that they were no longer in the combat business. They were in a different business, and then I retired in '98.
Wow, man! And how many years exactly was that? For 67 to 90?
It was like 30 years, 10 months, or something like that. I have to go back and do a deep trace, but yeah.
Wow.
Of course, some of it was reserve time. Okay, so I had a break in service. So I spent a little over 11 years as a captain. And so I was behind most of my peer year group people. So I was older, but I don't think it was a detriment.
No, clearly not. I mean, your varied and quite knowledgeable in all kinds of different things in the Army, just besides combat and special forces. I mean, this last part, I mean, heck, you could plan and run and set up an invasion of a country, it sounds like, with the last part of your career and all you learned from there.
I don't know that I could do it all, but I would certainly could contribute to the planning part of that.
Did you when you ended up retiring, was it a full-on retire? You didn't stay with the reserves or any National Guard?
Full-on retirement. See, a Title 10 says 30 years commissioned service. That's all you can do, and so that's what I did.
Wow.
And so I retired, and and one of my old bosses from Panama called me up and said, why don't you come, you know the reserve component, you're a force management guy. The Army's standing up a new staff section in the Army staff called the Army G8 resourcing. And we've got a contract to help them figure out how to do that. And so I went up to the Pentagon. It's been in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. So I was in the Pentagon during 9/11.
Oh.
And but we were helping the Army figure out towards the end, how do you field this new organization that Shinseki wanted to stand up, this new mobile, lightly armored force. And so the Stryker brigades were that was what I did. How do we change an armor unit to a Stryker unit? How do you change an infantry unit to a Stryker unit? What training do you have to go through? How do you lay it out? The equipment changes and MOS changes, and how do you repopulate and get them reorganized so that they can train as a unit, and how fast can you do it? Well, the goal was to do it within a year. I think the fastest we ever really did it was 18 months, which was real pretty fast.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow.
And the Army started out saying they wanted 6, and they said, well, maybe that's too many. And I convinced them, no, it's not too many. You need 9.
Whoa.
They ended up with 9. So I was successful there. And then because I was doing that, the people who built Strykers saw me and said, hey, how about coming out to Detroit and being our director for business development?
Wow.
That was in 2003.
That is very cool. So the Strykers are built, are they built in Detroit, or where are they?
They got part of the plan is up in London, Ontario.
Ah.
Because they were the ones that had the design for the lab, for the Marine Corps, and they were connected with MACV-OG, who had the design for a heavier 8x8 rather than the 6x6. So GD bought all of them. GD bought GM Defense, MACV-OG, Steyr, all of those European vehicle manufacturers. So part of it was built at London, Ontario. The rest of it was put together in Lima, Ohio, where we have the tank plant for the Abrams, and Anniston, Alabama, which was the assembly plant.
Wow. Did not realize Anniston had played a part in the Stryker history that. Very cool.
Area down at the depot at Anniston.
Very cool. I'm maybe about 45 minutes or so south of Anniston. So yeah. That's pretty cool. Wow. Every time I drive by there, I always think of the guys that I've spoken to that were there at one point in time, and it's crazy to see. It's pretty run down now, but it's like, wow, there's a lot of people that pass through there, those doors at one point in time or another. So did how long did you say doing that work with the Strykers and that you started doing in 2003?
My late wife passed away in 2018.
Very sorry, sir.
She passed away. I told my boss, I'm retiring. So I retired in early part of 19.
Wow. Jeez. So,
You can
man,
find me on YouTube. If you Mike Peck YouTube interview at AUSA, the big show.
I'm writing that down right now. I did not know that. And what is the AUSA?
That's the Association of the United States Army. Every year they have a big show in DC.
Okay.
All the Army people show up, foreign armies show up. All the big manufacturers come and bring their stuff. You can go play with it, look at it. They, make their sales pitch. I was the sales pitch guy.
Wow. That is very, yeah, I mean, you've definitely seen some very, very cool stuff throughout your career. And actually, let's see, let me pull this up to make sure when folks are looking, this is the correct one. I think it is. Is this some of your?
Yep.
Excellent. Heck
Yep.
yeah.
Now I have a beard as well as my mustache. But yeah, and the guy up at the top is one of the best interviewers I ever had, and almost every time they came, all of the defense writers wanted me to be the guy they talked to.
Wow, that I'm definitely going to be watching that. Yeah, that is Mike Peck, Director of Business Development at General Dynamics, discusses the company's latest combat vehicle and the future of combat vehicle needs. Wow. Yes, sir. I'll be checking that out. Man, I mean, that is just so cool. I mean, yeah, from SOG, Special Forces, direct action work to being a point of joint task force, your reserve work, all of the training you did. I mean, that kind of gets not forgotten, but with all the important stuff you were doing of learning and how to field armies and units and all of that, the training you did is outstanding. You've had quite the career, sir. I mean,
yeah, like I said, none of this was planned. I didn't plan any of it. It just happened. God has a way of moving you in the places he wants you to be at the time he wants you to be there. And sometimes you don't understand it. But nonetheless, it happens, and you depend on him to continue to guide you. I do that right now. And so, if anybody's out there and think they did things on their own, I beg to differ. It's not you, it's something else, whether you believe in him or not. It's humbling to know that somebody has a plan, and you're just along for the ride sometimes.
I could not have put that better myself. That's absolutely correct. I fully believe that. I have believed that. I know I wouldn't be where I'm at without the big man upstairs guiding me and putting me where I needed to be. Several situations I thought I didn't need to be, but it's turned out we're here and doing what we're doing for a reason. So yeah. I fully follow you on that, sir. And that was Mr.
Show you if we had video. I still have one of the original embroidered CCC patches that some local Vietnamese woman probably embroidered, probably at the behest of the sergeant major, was making money off of it.
You'll have to text me a picture of that, and I'll show it to everybody. Mr. Terry jumped into the chat a little bit late, and he was
just tell Terry that I have a full beard now too. Not as full as his. I keep mine trimmed a little better than he does.
I'm still hoping maybe if we can figure out to get you on camera. I think it might be very interesting to have you and Mr. Terry on here together.
That'd be good.
Yes, sir.
That'd be really good. Terry stayed in contact with a lot more people from CCC than I did. I'm kind of new to this forum. My sister doesn't even know what I did in Vietnam, because I couldn't tell her. And then by the time I could tell her, who cared? Nobody cared. Quite honestly, it wasn't until after I retired and I went to Delta, because my boss's son was a finance guy for Delta, and so we went to go visit. We were trying to sell him some vehicles, and they held the SOG guys in extremely high regard.
Oh, yes.
And the same thing when I went last year, when I went down to Scuba school and showed up, and the students and the staff and the instructors were bombarding me with questions, because I graduated from Scuba school in 1970. And so this is, last year. So it's been 55 years from the time I graduated to the time I went back down. And, things have changed. They got a great facility down there. It's absolutely gorgeous with all kinds of stuff we didn't have. And so it was fun to talk to them. It was fun to take a tour. I was going to go down again this year, and had some heart problems and couldn't go down. But yeah,
the guys worship. I'm starting to talk to more and more modern era ODA men, semi or retired Delta guys, MARSOC guys, and they worship the ground y'all walk on. And as a matter of fact, the dive school or combat dive school down at Key West and everything, I mean, they hold the SOG men in such high regard that the dive tower is named after Walt Shoemate. I mean, he helped find Key West, the location, as a matter of fact. So they absolutely worship the ground you guys walk on. I mean, Terry knows that firsthand. I mean, he gets recognized in town, from just these interviews, which is crazy. So you guys are absolutely giants now, and only growing as it should be. I'm so glad to see younger groups starting to realize the heroes of Vietnam. You may not have to agree with war, that's fine, but the men who fought and dedicated and lost their lives, the men still over in Laos, unfortunately, we owe it to pay respects to all of y'all and hold y'all in high esteem, which is the whole reason I started doing this.
Well, I'm glad you did. Again, I don't. If my experience in SOG was the defining event in my life, I would be sad. It was a great experience, great people, great underpinning for understanding clandestine operations, but so much more happens in your life that is just as noteworthy. I'm glad that I had an opportunity to have what I would call a fairly eclectic career.
Absolutely. You and that's very true. I mean, you literally did, probably, other than if you would have gone into Delta Force or whatever, you literally were at the pinnacle and doing the most you could do your first job. I mean, I was talking to Mr. Terry about that a long time ago, and how some guys, if they didn't get into anything or whatever, that is the highlight of their life. But most of you guys stayed in, found jobs, and did other stuff. But it is a unique and very historic fraternity that y'all are part of. And with you staying in this so long, that was just a short period of your life, a year and a half. And, you had another 30 or 29 years in the military doing stuff. So absolutely.
And there's four funny stories in there too that we didn't really get around.
Oh, I was
happen to you when you have so many different situations.
I was gonna see, and since Terry hopped on here, and we'll be ending in just a second, that's what I was gonna save was most of the SOG stuff, questions and stuff. I was gonna see maybe when you get some free time in the next week or so, maybe me, you, and Mr. Terry can get together, set something up, and y'all can reminisce and tell some funny stories and such.
Yeah, I think Terry's got some more than I do. He took a lot more pictures than I did.
Oh, I've got his jump drive plugged in. We've been using most of his photos today. So we'll plan to do that if you guys are open to it. We'll see about getting you and Mr. Terry on then.
All right, I am. I know Terry probably is too. You know, we like to talk about ourselves. That's
Oh, he was fully. He wanted you to tell your story solo first, but he said if you can get me and him on together, since we were together and served together, it would be a lot of fun. And I think not only me getting to hear it, but I think everybody else would get a real kick out of it, getting to see two guys reunite and share. So I think it would be a lot of fun.
I do too. That would be great.
All righty. Well, I'll if you'll just stay on just a second, I'm gonna close out and
Right.
but guys, I'll start working on getting the schedule together between me, Mr. Terry, and the Colonel and see what we can get cooked up. But Daniel, I'm saving your questions for that show since a lot of it deals with Vietnam. So just keep an eye out, save y'all's questions. And Mr. Peck, thank you for doing this. And guys, we will see y'all later on down the road. So have a good day. And